Okay, in this unit, we're going to go into chapter 6, and we're talking about price controls. Price controls are basically a control that's placed on a price. And remember, the economic term that's mentioned tells you directly what happens. So it's basically a way to control the price. And who does this? Essentially, the government steps in and says, hey, the prices are too high, or the prices are too low, so we need to you know, do something with your price in order to allow it to be more accessible to the public. So the first thing you need to understand is price, remember, and quantity are related. And based on the price, the quantity will follow. So you want to examine as we go through the lesson how price and how quantity controls create problems and can also result in a market being ineffective because the market is unable to thrive. Why? Because there's been a control placed on the overall price. The next thing we want to look at is what are the side effects of intervention? Government intervention can be successful, but at some point it can really be negative depending on the impact it has on the market. The market allows money to circulate. The market allows us to remain competitive. The market allows us to uh, market allows a lot of things to function. So if there's an issue with the market, then typically the income may have an impact on impact availability of supplies may be impacted because the market is changing. So we're going to look at that as well. And the last one we're looking at is who benefits from market interventions like price controls, and then who loses because of market interventions like price controls. So we're going to go through this. Go ahead and pause the video at this time, write these questions down, and then refer to these questions as I go through the information that will be shared within the next few slides. All right, so let's go ahead and continue going over this. So the first thing I need you to consider are the questions that I previously asked. So market equilibrium again means that the supply and the demand are equal to one another. And ideally this is considered decent in a way. But at this point, you're not able to maximize a lot because the demand is here and you're perfectly able to meet the demand based on the supply that you're willing to release. So there's not a lot of room for movement in your profit revenue. But let's look at it this way. So when we look at price controls, you have price ceilings and then you have price floor. So the price ceiling ultimately is going to be below market equilibrium. So in this case, we'll use the example of, let's say this is the Pembroke Pines area, and in Pembroke Pines, because there was a increase in closing of businesses, residents that worked in the city of Pembroke Pines had a decrease in their income. So we understand that with the law of demand, when we have a decrease in income, typically based on the economist's viewpoint, our consumption is going to decrease as well. Well, you can't really reduce the consumption of rent, but it can be harder for you to live in an area because it is more expensive and you have some type of impact on your finances. So as a result, government steps in and says, listen, um, the rent's simply too expensive. So we're going to urge you, and most times it comes from the state, to reduce your price when it comes to rent. You're going to place a cap on the rent. So the rent's going to go from 1,000, in this case to 800. So with a price ceiling, the legislated price is going to go from 1,000 to 800, just as an example. So there's a $200 decrease, right, in the amount that you would get per unit because of that. So if you were to do it and you then figure out, well, how much is going to be supplied at this new price, because now the new market equilibrium price is now 800 with a price ceiling. So what you're going to do in order to determine how much is being supplied at 800 is look at the line of supply and see where it falls. So the line of supply falls there at 1.8 million. So far you would say um, when a price ceiling is implemented, the legislated price of 1,000 is dropped to $800, resulting in a supply of 1.8 million. However, creating a demand of 2.2 million. Because of this, a shortage is going to exist because the demand is greater than the supply. I'm going to say that one more time. Remember, we're working on explaining the concepts so that you're able to explain them and you're able to better understand them. So let me explain this again. The legislative price has decreased from $1,000 to $800 because of a price ceiling. So as a result, the supply at the new legislative price of 800 will be 1.8 million. However, the demand is 2.2 million. So because the demand is higher than the supply at $800 price ceiling price, you're going to experience a shortage because the demand is greater than the supply, so there's not enough for you to do it. So what that means is that translates to people are going to be looking for places to live and they won't find any available because the resources are short. You're also going to see this when it comes to subsidized housing. Section 8, sometimes individuals are placed on a lottery system and it may be 2 to sometimes 10 years before they're actually awarded a place to stay for subsidized housing. If you're unfamiliar with what subsidized housing is or Section 8, it's based on your limited income. So your income is reviewed for any public assistance program. And if it's low enough and based on the amount of dependents you have, then you will pay a smaller amount in rent. The government will pay the other part. Some people like subsidized housing tenants because it's a guaranteed payment, and then others dislike it because they realize they can't make more than the projected amount. So even if the market is increasing and rent is going up in a certain area, if you have a subsidized controlled apartment, then whatever the government says, hey, in order for a person to reside in this location with this income that qualifies for public assistance, this is the most that they can afford to pay. So even though the market may be increasing, you can't go up in your price. Only way you can go up in your price with subsidized housing is if the tenant, the person renting the apartment and receiving the aid, has an increase in their income. So take a second, pause the video, and go ahead and record this information. I'm now going to erase the section that I just wrote in purple and green to go ahead and explain something else to you. Okay, we talked about price ceiling. Now we're going to talk about price floor, and it's also going to be opposite. So remember, ideally, you would think a price ceiling would be up here, and you would think a price floor would be here, but it's not. It's actually opposite. So The price ceiling we went over, I believe I said we were going to assume that it was at 800, but now we're going to put a price floor in. So the price floor will be at 1200. Okay, so whenever you have a price floor, this is the minimum amount that you can pay. The reason why the government will say, hey, you can't charge less than this amount is because they may understand it takes a lot of money for research, or they understand the amount of cost of production that goes into it, or to help regulate the salaries if it's like something within the agricultural business of the farmers. So they're going to say, hey, you can't go lower than this price, because they may understand in order for a farmer to stay in business, they have to have a certain amount of revenue, and because of a certain amount of revenue, there has to be some type of level of sustainability. So if they drop the price less than 1200, for instance, and this is just hypothetical, not related to apartments, if they drop it below, then they're really going to lose money, or they won't be able to pay off their current bills, ultimately crashing that market, because if it's more expensive or they're not making enough revenue, then you're going to have a decline in your supply, and then it's going to result in a shortage, and then typically the prices can go back up so that more revenue can be brought in. So it's a little different. Anyway, with that said, um, at a price floor, right? The legislative price, um, um, the legislative price is now set to restrict you from dropping the price any lower. So this is the floor. And then you would say at 1200, there is, and I don't think this line is straight, 1.8 million apartments demanded, but again, I don't know if this line is straight. It's not. I can't tell if it is going here or not, because I can't estimate if I'm off to the left or right. But let's say that it'll be 2.3 million. So if 2.3 million apartments are available for rent at $1,200, but only 1.8 million people are requesting it, then you want to find the difference between the two. The difference between the two is basically just a matter of subtraction, and that'll tell you what the surplus in this case will be. So in order to find out the shortage, where it relates to here, you're going to subtract the demand from the supply, or you subtract the supply for um, how do you know it's greater? Because it's further away from zero. Zero's here. It's further out. So we know that's what happens. So you can also see it here as well. The supply is a little bigger than the demand. So you know that it's going to be a surplus within this region. This will be market equilibrium. And then at this point, it's going to be a shortage because the demand is higher than the supply. So just to kind of go over it again, the market price moves to a level where they want it to be equal. So it's going to move to market equilibrium. But remember, market equilibrium doesn't really work the best for everyone. To recap again, therefore, the government does try to regulate things to put it in a perspective and to make it more affordable for those that it may not be most affordable for at the moment. And then the price ceiling is always going to be the maximum amount. So think about the ceiling, higher, the maximum amount. sellers are allowed to charge for a good or service. They can't go over that. If they go over it, they're violating the price control, which was resulted in the price control that resulted in a cap on the legislative price or the legal legislative price. And then we have the price floor, which is the minimum amount, so you can go any lower. Minimal price required to pay for a good or service. You can't increase it at this point. So the minimal you can charge, the lowest you can charge is whatever it's indicated at. So in this case, the lowest would be $1,200. You can charge more, but you can't charge anything less than that. And for the price ceiling means the maximum amount you can charge is $800. So you can go down, but you can't go up. So for price floor, for price ceiling, the maximum amount is what you're allowed to charge. So that would be 800. So that means this is the range you would stay in. And then if there's a price floor, you can't go beneath the price. You have to stay within this range. So ultimately, a price ceiling is going to result whenever a price ceiling or price floor will appear whenever there's a crisis, natural disaster, shift in population. There's a problem with the CDC reviewing the amount of communicable diseases. Um, People are becoming more ill. There's increase in diabetes. There's an increase in the cost of steel, resulting in an increase in the rental price of the apartment. Some examples as well. And then what's happening right now in Orlando, Florida, kind of interesting. Typically, remember the state, and we're going to go into this in the government, but it's called a reserve power. So reserve powers are powers that are given by the state, but Orlando says they're going to take this power away from the state, which is called devolution, and then give it to a local community. So we're going to give it to Orlando. And Orlando will look at factors of median income, the amount of people in rental units versus jobs that are available. This is um, Lords, especially in New York, will sell units that are uninhabitable, but it's passed off as a suitable apartment, but it's really not because it's either not up to code or something hasn't been done to address the issue. So, if you don't have a price control, remember essentially with this, the market is able to be competitive because we understand that the law of demand reminds us that the lower the price, then typically you're going to buy a lot more, and the higher the price you'll buy less as a consumer. But as a producer, you're not willing to release. If you know the price is low, you're not willing to release a lot of units at all. So in this case, the supply is going to be the represented on the chart as well, and you'll be able to have more of a competitive edge. So that's what happens ultimately when we do not have any price controls placed prices. So again, we went over this before, but you just want to understand that there are several effects. The first effect basically being that you may have a low quality when it comes to setting a price control. So you're going to have a lower quality, and I'll write this on the side. So a lower quality because it's too low, so they may not have enough to keep up with it or even and then you're also going to have a low someone's going to have to reduce the supply because it's not advantageous for them to keep it up because they're not going to get the same amount of money for it. So those are two of the things that is going to create a low quality and a lower quantity. It's also going to result in a lot of resources, remember, because you're not able to produce the amount that you normally would. So a lot of wasted resources. It could also, depending on the competitive impact it has on the market, it could create like a satellite market, if you may, or a non-governmental regulated market. We know that as a black market, basically. So it can create black markets because the supplies are not there, so people are gonna find it elsewhere. Don't know why this is not working. Market, there we go. Okay, so black market. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4 so far. And then the last one essentially is you're just not gonna have enough to give to customers. That's how it works. So take a minute, write it. Now, the same thing is true of a price floor. We just talked about a price ceiling. So all of these are related to a price ceiling. Now, when it comes to a price floor, the first thing you want to consider is at this point, you're normally going to have some type of surplus, right? Because they're saying you can't charge less than this. So there's going to be a surplus. You're going to have to charge like a relatively high price. And we know the consumer is not going to buy it when it's a higher price. So you can always assume you're going to have a surplus. Remember, you can kind of see how much is demanded if you look here. So at this point, like, because of the law, demand 1.8 million apartments will be demanded. And there will be a supply of 2.2 units available. So at this point, the supply is greater than the demand, so you will have a surplus. Nonetheless, how can a price floor impact you negatively? The first thing it could also do is give you an effective quality. So I'm going to put this in yellow. I'm going to put a check mark in yellow if an item on the price ceiling is the same for the price floor because I don't want to write it over again. So inefficiency when it happens. And a price floor is normally going to occur. And when a price floor happens, it's going to create essentially missed opportunity, right? Because you're told you can't go lower than a certain amount. So because there's a lot of missed opportunities, it's going to create a lot of inefficiencies that are similar to that of the price floor. So the first one is going to give you an inefficiency of low quality, of low quality, and an inefficiency of low quantity. Low quantity. So you're gonna have low quantity because they're saying, hey, you can't go lower than this price, right? So if this is market equilibrium, and they're saying 1,200 is the lowest that you can do, so you have to stay within this range. Only that's the lowest that you can um, charge for an apartment. You can't charge 800 for an apartment, so you understand people are not going to want as much. The first thing, you're going to have a lot of allocation of sales, inefficiency and allocation of sales because at this point we're going to have a surplus, so no one's going to be buying your product, so it's going to be sitting there or the product's not going to be sold. And then you also have amount of wasted resources, so that's similar too. Remember, the check mark indicates that it's also a part of the price floor. And then the last thing is, well, a few things it's going to do. It's going to increase the high quality because the price is going up. So it's going to write this down. Well, I don't know why it's not working. Inefficiently high. Wow. High quality. So that's what's going to happen with the price floor. Um, when I say that a price floor is often going to lead to inefficiently high quality, what I'm meaning is the seller is going to offer a really high quality good because it's at a higher price, right? So the more expensive it is, we think, oh, it's a better product. So the seller offers more at that price, right? But then the buyer says, oh, I'm going to wait. So that's what I mean, like inefficiently high quality. Like it's going to be an enormously amount of quality with the product, but nobody's going to buy it because it's too expensive. And then that's really essentially it. The things that you need to remember. This is just kind of an example of what happens with price ceiling causes. But if people live in an environment too long, like this is from pronounced by India. And basically, these are the apartments that they were living in. But the problem is, it doesn't go from like family to family to family. It goes from family member to family member to family member. And that's also the same thing that happens in lower East Fort Lauderdale. Majority of the residents within the greater Fort Lauderdale area, ranging from Broward Boulevard, that goes on to Sunrise, and then from Dixie Highway, I believe, or Federal Highway through 15th Terrace or 15th Street, something like that, right before 95 exit. So that area has the largest amount of individuals that own their homes. The problem is the homes transfer from family member to family member, and that's when you have some challenges. So there's going to be like a poor quality rent control because you don't even know if the person that initially took it out is still living, um, because it's been transferred so many times. So the quality supplied is one thing, and then you're gonna have to come up with like some type of way at this point to figure out as a landlord how you're gonna make money, and then determine if you want to place like a limit or a quota on it. But you also have to understand that there's a limit in even being able to do this because everyone doesn't have the license to move forward on these major projects. Excuse me. I'm getting tongue tied, but just go ahead and record the notes. Make sure you understand essentially what price ceiling, price floor are. We're going to go over a few examples in class of what happens when demand and supply meet, and then we're going to go over price ceiling and price floor. After we review price ceiling, price floor, and how demand and supply meet, we will have a full review. After we have our full review, we will then after we go over it, we're going to have a review. And after we finish our review, partial review of the information from today, which we're going to take an exercise in class after you watch the video in class. So when you come in tomorrow, or the next day, I think I see you all in 2 days. When you come in, you're going to watch this video first, take notes while you're watching the video, 30 minutes. We're going to do the examples, then we're going to do the activity, then we're going to go over the concepts to application practice. After that, the following class period, which will fall under the week of November 4th through whatever, we're going to have a review where we're going to review this information, the college, and then we're going to go into our chapter test, which will be the second portion of it, and then we're moving on to the next and final unit. I'll go ahead and take the notes. soon as the 30 minutes is up, I'm shutting it down and we're going directly into the activity so we can get some work done, and then also give you some time in class to work on Foolproof Me, because some of you still have not completed Module 9, and Module 11 will be due in a few days, so I want to make sure you have enough. Okay, and for this slide, it's pretty much self-explanatory. It's exactly what I discussed already. It's just a visual for you to actually write it down. So remember, after the 30 minutes, I'm moving on.